Hey guys, I hope you're doing great today. This is our chapter number 36 in which we are going to discuss what is K8s, Kubernetes used for. Guys, since I told you that it would be a complete Kubernetes course and I will try my best to cover each and every Kubernetes concept. So, in the previous chapter, we discussed what is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an open source orchestration tool which is used to automate, scale, and manage containerized applications. So, this is actually the definition of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is also known as the captain, and it is responsible to handle all the complexities of running applications, those applications that are running inside the containers. And those containers actually reside or run on the cluster of several servers. I mean to say, each cluster can have multiple servers. And on those servers, we run containers and we have millions of containers. And we definitely need a captain to watch out all those containers. That is actually the example that I told you in my previous What is Kubernetes lecture. So I gave you the example of a ship with hundreds or thousands of containers. And that ship is actually run by a captain. So we can say that Kubernetes is the captain who runs the ship, and that ship contains thousands or millions of containers. So now we should know that what is Kubernetes used for. But before proceeding to the lecture, make sure that you have subscribed DevOps Molvi, because I want you to learn every concept of Kubernetes from the very beginning. Alright guys, number one, the Kubernetes is used for container orchestration, which is our number one point. Container orchestration. You might have heard about orchestration, but what is orchestration? First of all, we should know what is orchestration. It is also included in the definition of Kubernetes that it is an open source orchestration platform. But what is actually orchestration? So guys, listen to it carefully. Orchestration is the process to automate. Okay? Automate what? So orchestration is the process to automate provisioning. Number one, provisioning, scaling, deploying, and deleting applications inside the containers. Okay, so I can say that orchestration is a process which automates the provisioning, the scaling, the deployment, and deleting of applications running inside the containers. Now that would be actually the simplest concept, or you can say the simplest definition of orchestration. So you can say that orchestration is a process which automates the provisioning, scaling, deploying, and deleting of containerized applications. And that's what actually Kubernetes does. It orchestrates, it automates the process of provisioning new applications, scaling up or down the applications, deploying or updating applications, or deleting applications that are no longer needed. So this is actually the first, you can say, feature, or that is actually the key concept. What is Kubernetes used for? It is used for container orchestration. Now what is orchestration? Orchestration is a process which automates these features. So it is actually the fully automated process, and Kubernetes does it without any issues. So whenever you are searching on Google about the best container orchestration platform, you will find Kubernetes at the top. Kubernetes is the number one container orchestration platform because it automates the process of deployment, scaling, provisioning, and deleting of applications running inside the container. Now, additionally, there are three more benefits or advantages of container orchestration. After all, when all these processes are automated, then we can save a lot of time by deploying applications manually. The time that is required to deploy any application manually is reduced when we deploy the application automatically. And number two, it also increases the productivity of DevOps engineers. And number three, it also reduces the resources and costs required for our applications. So you don't have to worry about orchestration anymore. I hope that you are now clear with the orchestration concept. It just automates the process of provisioning and deploying, scaling, or deleting containerized application. Alright guys, second feature, or you can say the second advantage of using Kubernetes is to scaling applications. Okay, scaling applications using Kubernetes. So that is actually the second feature or the second goal of what is Kubernetes used for. So what would be the simplest definition of scaling applications? The simplest concept of scaling application is to scale applications up or down based on demand. Alright guys, now you can see this simple concept of scaling application. When I have a high demand, it means that my application should have the ability to scale up the resources when there is huge amount of traffic or when there is a large number of users accessing the application. So all my resources should scale up because more users mean more resources are required to avoid any downtime and to provide the best customer or user experience. So this is actually scaling up. The resources are automatically scaled up according to the users, according to the load, according to the traffic. And when there are no peak times, there are no users, my resources, extra resources that are no longer needed should scale down. And there would be less resources, mean that there would be cost reduction. So this is actually an automated process. More users mean the application should scale up and it should have the ability to handle all those users. Less users, it means that my application should scale down and all the extra resources should be deleted to avoid the cost. And now this should be an automated process, and that's what Kubernetes does. It scales up or scales down applications according to the users, according to the traffic, or according to the load. So that would be our second feature of what is Kubernetes used for. It automatically scales up and scales down applications according to the user's demand. I hope that now this concept is clear. Alright guys, number third point of what is Kubernetes used for. Kubernetes is used for load balancing our traffic. We all know that load balancing, as the name says, is a technique that equally distributes the traffic among servers. So for instance, if we have 5 or 10 servers and I want to equally distribute traffic on all those servers, I would have to use a load balancer. But what is load balancing in Kubernetes? In Kubernetes, the traffic is equally distributed among multiple pods. Okay, we know that in load balancing, we distribute traffic equally on the servers. And in Kubernetes, those servers are actually replaced by pods. Okay, that is actually the simplest concept. Now I have this pod 1, pod. Don't worry, we are going to discuss pod in detail. A pod contains a number of multiple containers. Okay, a pod contains containers. So this is actually pod 2 and this is my pod 3 on worker nodes. So all these pods contain applications running inside the containers. So load balancing equally distributes the traffic in these, this is pod 2. So load balancing in Kubernetes equally distributes the traffic in these pods. Now for instance, due to some issues, this pod has been crashed It is also our fourth feature, which is known as self-healing. So that pod is, for instance, no longer working. Now our traffic should be routed in these two pods because they are in good health. So that's how load balancing works. Load balancing equally distributes the traffic among multiple pods, and that's what Kubernetes does. So in general term, load balancing actually distributes traffic among multiple servers on the same network, and in Kubernetes, load balancing means to distribute traffic among multiple pods on the same network. That is how load balancing works in Kubernetes. Alright guys, the number fourth feature of Kubernetes, what is Kubernetes is used for? It is used for self-healing. And now what is self-healing? Self-healing means if a container in any pod, you can see these are actually containers, okay? Container 1, 2, this is also container 1, container 2, and container, there are 3 containers in pod 3, okay? So these are containers running inside the pods. If any of the container in any pod is failed, Kubernetes will automatically detect the failure of any container, and Kubernetes will redeploy to its original or working state. And that is known as self-healing. For instance, let me explain it with an example. If in pod 3, number 2 container has been failed, so Kubernetes will automatically detect that there is number 2 container that has been failed for some reasons. So we have to understand that Kubernetes monitors all the containers at every time, and Kubernetes compares the containers inside pods to their desired state. Now in that case, Kubernetes will find that, oh, number 2 container has been failed. So Kubernetes will restart the container, and once that container is ready to be deployed, it will be deployed inside that pod. So that stuff is automatically done by Kubernetes, and that is why it is known as self-healing. And also guys, for your information, self-healing is not just limited to the containers inside the pod. Self-healing also detects and watches out the worker nodes. And we have these pods running on the worker nodes. So Kubernetes also checks out and watches the worker nodes. It also watches the containers inside the pods. And for any reason, if any worker node or container inside a pod is failing, Kubernetes will restart or fix the issues, and it will redeploy the container to its desired state when everything is all good. So that is actually known as, this whole process is known as self-healing. So guys, you must be thinking how we can write the Kubernetes configuration. And the good news is that we already have worked on YAML. YAML is used in CI/CD, YAML is used in Docker Compose, and luckily we have the YAML configurations in Kubernetes as well. So if you have watched my Docker Compose or CI/CD, GitHub Actions or GitLab lecture, you must be aware of a YAML configuration file. So guys, Kubernetes also uses YAML configuration files for provisioning, scaling, and deploying applications in containers. But don't worry, we are going to learn YAML configurations of Kubernetes in our upcoming labs. Alright guys, number 6th and the last point of our today's lecture, what is Kubernetes used for? It is used for rollouts and rollbacks. Rollouts and rollbacks. Guys, we know that in software development, our developers work and they introduce new features in any application. And when that feature is tested by the QA team, it is ready to be deployed on our QA or sandbox environments before deploying it to the production environment. So rolling out means to update your application or to launch new features without any downtime. And Kubernetes rolls out updates without any downtime or with very minimum downtime. And in case of any issues, if those changes are not meeting the client's requirement, then we can roll back all those updates or we can revert all those changes. So rollouts means to roll out new updates, new changes in your application. And in case of any issues, we can easily roll back all those updates or changes without any downtime. So that's what rollouts and rollbacks in Kubernetes automatically roll out your changes in your application. And if those changes are not as per expectation, you can roll back all those changes, or you can revert those changes automatically in Kubernetes. So let me repeat, what is Kubernetes used for quickly. Kubernetes is used for container orchestration, self-healing, scaling applications, load balancing, networking, automatically rolling out or rolling back changes, and with YAML configurations. So that's it for today's lecture, guys. What is Kubernetes used for? In the next lecture, we are going to learn how Kubernetes works. So we are going to discuss the architecture of Kubernetes, pods, containers, worker nodes, master nodes. So the next chapter would be really knowledgeable. Make sure that you stay tuned to DevOps Molvi. I will watch you in the next lecture. Have a good one and bye.